Part 1. You will hear a phone conversation where a surveyor asks a respondent about their fitness activities. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now listen and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello.
Hello? Who's speaking?
Hello. I'm a representative of the Meadow Research Group, and I would like to ask you a few questions about fitness.
Oh, that's quite an interesting topic.
Yes, we think so too.
But I am actually a bit busy right now.
Don't worry. This will take no more than 5 minutes. It's 3:15 now, so we'll be finished by 3:20.
Well, all right. If it's really that quick.
It will be. So, first I need to know your location, that is, which district or neighborhood. The last respondent was from Fairview, for instance.
Fairview? That's quite near me. I am in Greenhill.
Another northern suburb then. I actually know someone in Greenhill. It's a nice area. Now, I need your age group for this survey. Are you below 25, between 25 and 34, 35 and 44, and so on?
I'll be 45 in a few months, so that puts me in the 45 to 54 category.
Well, that's in a few months, so for now, you're in the 35 to 44 group.
Oh, right. Just put that down then.
Okay, now, I need to note your occupation. The last respondent was an office worker, for example. The one before that was a musician.
I used to be a musician as well, teaching piano.
And now?
Now you can put household responsibilities. Actually, I plan to start working soon as a baker, but that won't be for a while. I'm waiting for my partner's cafe to open.
Baker? That sounds exciting, but it'll put household responsibilities for now. All right, that just leaves some personal details. These are optional, so you can skip them if you prefer.
What kind of details, exactly?
Oh, just general information. Married, with kids, a single parent, that sort of thing. The last participant was a single father.
I'm married, but don't have children. Just put married, no kids.
I'm married with kids myself, but it'll put in your details and that completes the profile. Now we can move on to the actual survey. Are you ready?
All right, let's start.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
This survey is about your fitness routine.
Honestly, I don't exercise much at all.
Well, the main question is what kind of physical activity you do, even if it's minimal, like doing housework. Do you clean your home?
My partner does most of the cleaning, actually. But I walk to the grocery store quite often, up to 5 times a week.
I'll note that down unless there's anything else.
Not really. But I'm careful about my diet. I follow a strict meal plan, and I do yoga, though it's more for relaxation and to tighten muscles than heavy exercise.
Those are important as well. But what about sports? Do you play any sport? Even if it was just in the past.
My partner plays volleyball at the community center, and I sometimes watch. When he was younger, he was on a volleyball team, but I never played myself.
Have you ever done any physical activity?
I used to go cycling in a nearby forest reserve.
Well, that's definitely a form of exercise, so it'll include that, but not volleyball. Now, lastly, do you have any future exercise plans? Do you expect to take up any new physical activities?
I once wanted to try ballroom dancing, but that's unlikely to happen. Realistically, I am considering joining a swimming class at the local sports center, though my partner suggests we should try hiking instead. I don't think I'd enjoy that. It's too exhausting.
I get it. I used to go hiking too, and it's really tiring. Swimming is definitely a great alternative.
But I'll soon be working as a baker in my partner's cafe. I expect I'll be quite exhausted from long shifts, but if I have any energy left, I might go swimming to relax.
That is the end of Part 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 1. Part 2. You will hear the director of a language center library explaining about its facilities to some new students. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen and answer questions 11 to 16.
Let me describe some of the resources available at the library, also known as the Independent Learning Center, or ILC. We're standing close to the borrowing counter at the entry gate. You can check out books there, but as most of our materials are not available for loan, it is also recommended that you study here in the library. As a result, there are seats at the far corner in front of us and down the center of the library.
For some serious reading, there is the quiet reading section on the left.
We had previously kept the computers there, but we later realized that the peaceful spot was more appropriate for its current usage. Instead, the computers were moved to a more central area on the left, directly next to us. The newspaper and magazine section used to be located in this location, which is a little perplexing again. However, because the quiet reading location residents had to go too far to retrieve this material, it was moved to the corner next to them. Therefore, you are welcome to read the newspapers there. However, the reference books, those massive, heavy dictionaries, atlases, and encyclopedias, were all positioned against the wall at the other end of the building. This was because we needed more room for the magazine racks, which are typically a reader favorite, and they weren't that popular overall. Alright, in addition to reading, you need practice listening, which calls for the audio section. As you can see, we placed this in the last corner, up there on your right, because such an activity requires a calm space. Simply borrow the listening packs, settle in, and enjoy the music. There are CD players and headphones available. That only leaves the main library then. We have them farther away than in other libraries, where that is frequently immediately next to the newspaper and magazine section, giving patrons the opportunity to select from any literary genre. Simply follow your nose past the center settlement there to locate the main library, which is surrounded by a ton of shelves with a variety of engaging hooks and listening packs.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
The special sessions are a great service that is provided at the ILC. I'd like to tell you more about now. What can you do in them? For a start, many of you need practice in speaking English. And for that, we hold a special discussion session led by a teacher. That may be loud. In fact, we want it to be loud since that would indicate a lot of people are conversing. It used to be from 10:30 to 1:30 and is located in the central seating area. However, we discovered that the loudness was upsetting the usual ILC consumers, so we cut the conversation short and rescheduled it for the morning at 9 a.m. when less people are tired at the center. The duration is 1.5 hours. Now, what about the ability to write? We can send another teacher to assist you there though. Since writing is a rather peaceful activity, the instructor spends 1:30 to 3 hours in the peaceful reading area. Since they all teach in the morning, there cannot be an instructor for these writing skills during the 10:30 midday time frame. Naturally, this means that there can't be an on-call instructor in the morning either, even though many people would prefer one, especially those who complete their early morning classes at 10:30 to 12. All of these children will have to wait until noon, when a teacher will be in the audio section for 3 hours, prepared to answer any questions they may have. We had another instructor teaching in the central settlement from 3 to 6 p.m. until recently, but we had to cancel it because of the noise, which disrupted the late users of the ILC. The language exchange, where local students who wish to learn your language can assist you in practicing your English, may also be rather boisterous. Since this is typically done in pairs, the noise level is sufficiently low that the central seating exchange doesn't need to take place at 9 a.m. Instead, it may take place at a more agreeable hour of 10:30. However, that needs to end by 1:30, after which there are more solitary and quiet activities.
That is the end of Part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 2. Part 3. You will hear a discussion between two students about ways to take better notes during lectures. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hey, Olivia, what did you think about that presentation?
A bit tricky to keep up with, but I have some useful methods for taking notes while listening, which really help. So I can go over the speaker's key points later.
Techniques for note-taking while listening? Reviewing it later? That sounds useful. I have to admit, I find it difficult to capture the main ideas of what's being said. Take a look at my notes.
Well, I can already spot one major issue. You're writing entire words like decade when a simple D would work. And instead of growth, you could just use an upward arrow. Also, why spell out million when an M is enough?
Oh, I see. Just use abbreviations. That's actually a smart idea.
It's the most fundamental technique, allowing you to write information more quickly. Some presenters speak faster than others, so you can't afford to waste time. But you have to be really familiar with your chosen set of symbols.
Why is that?
Because you'll be looking at these notes weeks or even months later when you start drafting your report. So you need to be able to understand them without struggling.
I think I can handle that, even just by looking at your notes. IMD must stand for immediately.
But regarding the lecture as a whole, I knew the professor would be giving a set of specific recommendations and comparing two alternative approaches. So I formatted my page in advance, adding the features consistent with the nature of what I was going to hear.
I think I need an example of what you mean.
Sure. Take a look at my page. Before the lecture, I drew large headings saying recommendations. You should always draw these, and I drew a table saying Approach 1 and Approach 2. At the end, I drew a flowchart, as obviously the final recommendation would be a step-by-step approach. Then I was prepared in advance to simply fill in the spaces.
Wow, that's really smart.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Your note-taking tips sound amazing, but I still have one concern, Olivia. How do you decide on your page layout before the session starts? I mean, how can you predict the way the information will be delivered and choose the best structure for your notes?
It's quite straightforward when you think about it. What's your next seminar about?
Criminal justice.
Well, that tells me you'll need a flowchart since legal procedures follow a strict this happens first, then that sequence. The courtroom has a structured process, with each step needing to be followed precisely to ensure fairness.
Yeah, that makes sense. Law is very systematic and organized. But what about anthropology? That involves comparing different societies.
Exactly, which means a comparison chart would work best. You can efficiently list information in a structured way.
But sometimes the talk isn't that straightforward. The lecturer introduces a really intricate mix of themes.
In that case, use a mind map, like the structure of a tree, with one central theme and connected branches for all related details, perspectives, and explanations.
Got it. That actually sounds really efficient. I like that. But what about business administration? How would you tackle that?
Similar to anthropology, I'd use a network diagram, which is basically like a mind map. but with a directional flow, showing how ideas and concepts are linked together. The key difference is that this structure includes directional pathways. Certain points lead in one direction rather than another.
Okay, directional flow. That sounds reasonable. What about other subjects like international relations? That doesn't seem to have a fixed order.
In that case, I would just write my notes in a continuous sequence, meaning a linear format with a straightforward structure, and of course, use symbols to save time.
All right, that just leaves journalism.
For that, I wouldn't use a set layout. As you said, sometimes it's hard to predict how the information will be structured. In such cases, the best approach is to prepare headings in advance, but keep them general, something like main idea 1, main idea 2, subtopic A, B, and so on.
Got it.
But always be ready to modify your note-taking approach depending on how the session unfolds, using any of these techniques if they suit the content better.
That is the end of Part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 3. Part 4. You will hear a discussion on how caverns are formed. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 33. Now listen and answer questions 31 to 33.
If there is one geographical feature that has long captivated people, it is caverns, those subterranean voids that individuals can explore. No known cavern in existence remains untouched, with thorough investigations carried out even in distant locations, such as the Shadow Cavern in Sumatra, or extraordinarily extensive and complex formations such as Colossus Cavern in Canada. Perhaps the most difficult to navigate are those submerged beneath the water level, completely filled with liquid, where the exploration is classified as cavern diving. Regardless of the challenge, if a cavern is identified, no matter how intricate or hazardous, it will be examined. The official term for cavern research is speleology, a discipline that encompasses various fields such as physics, earth sciences, ecology, and topography, the science of crafting precise maps, since the most extensive caverns can span thousands of hectares and possess highly intricate networks. If exploration is merely for recreation, it is termed spelunking. But given the obstacles and potential risks, many enthusiasts also engage with one of these academic fields. Concerning the number of caverns worldwide, studies indicate that only a minor portion has been located and systematically recorded, mainly in regions where spelunking has long been a favored pursuit, such as in Canada, Spain, or New Zealand. Brazil, for instance, has enormous tracts of sedimentary rock, an ideal foundation for cavern formation, and is believed to host among the highest numbers of caverns globally. Yet, very few have been officially documented due to a lack of widespread interest in spelunking there. Therefore, as exploration advances, new caverns will inevitably come to light, likely causing the total count to shift dramatically in the coming years.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 34 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 34 to 40.
Given that caverns are such enigmatic and alluring spaces, a fundamental question arises. How do they form? The most prevalent process involves the action of slightly acidic water in what is termed erosion by dissolution. Here, liquid infiltrates the ground and percolates through rock formations. If the rock is reactive, the liquid gradually dissolves portions of it, and over long periods, These passages expand to create caverns or intricate cavern systems. The largest and most widespread formations arise in dolomite, although other substances such as anhydrite, quartzite, and even halite can also form caverns. When a cavern develops concurrently with the rock formation, it is referred to as a primary cavern, with lava tunnels being the most frequently observed example. As molten rock from volcanic activity moves downhill, the outermost layer solidifies first, allowing the internal lava to continue flowing. If most of the molten rock eventually drains away, a hollow channel remains. The nation of Japan is home to several prominent caverns of this nature, and even remote Madagascar possesses a number of them. Additionally, there are marine caverns, created when tidal forces erode coastal escarpments along fault zones or softer stone layers. These caverns are typically short, reaching a maximum of around 60 meters, as the erosive action of waves has limited reach. Nevertheless, it is dolomite caverns that will always remain the most fascinating. This is largely due to the presence of mineral deposits. As groundwater trickles downward through the cavern ceiling, encountering shifts in temperature and atmospheric conditions, it releases minuscule amounts of dissolved carbonate minerals. Over time, millions of droplets contribute to the formation of cave structures. This slow process creates formations called stalactites, which hang from the ceiling, and stalagmites, which grow from the ground. In some cases, water spreads over large rock surfaces, forming flowstone. Other geological processes can create stunning, milky white crystalline structures. One remarkable example of these formations is Sentinel Cavern in Argentina. In the 1960s, spelunkers noticed airflow coming from beneath large rock slabs on the cavern floor. This was a strong sign of an unexplored passage. However, they had to wait until 1992 for specialists to get permission to start excavations. 3 years later, in 1995, they finally broke through a tunnel. This revealed one of the world's longest cavern systems. It was the deepest in South America and contained breathtaking formations. Interestingly, many of these formations had a golden tint. Scientists discovered that sulfur compounds were responsible. These compounds likely came from hydrogen sulfide emissions linked to nearby petroleum reserves. The gases traveled through geological fractures and mixed with groundwater. This created sulfuric acid, which dissolved the dolomite rock from below. This process was different from the usual downward seepage seen in most dolomite caverns.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 4.